From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. TikTok has become a go-to source for news, especially for younger audiences. But short-form videos on the social network don't look or sound much like traditional journalism. Users see a stream of bite-sized videos that favor strong opinions and controversy over nuance and depth. Videos like this one.
I wish you liberals would quit trying to cheat. American people already spoke. We elected Donald Trump.
So how does consuming political content on TikTok actually affect young people? Michelangelo Landgrave is a political scientist at CU Boulder and co-author of a new study that looked into that question. The researchers found that TikTok may not change young voters' political views, but it does tend to make them feel more angry or anxious about the world. They recently published their findings in the journal Political Studies Review. Michelangelo said the study was partly inspired by seeing his students use TikTok and other social media far more than traditional news outlets.
I've got a bunch of undergraduate students. They're on TikTok. They're on YouTube Shorts. They're not watching cable news.
Right.
And, out of curiosity, I turn to them and ask, how many of you actually get your news from cable news anymore? And many of them just kind of look at me blank, like, what is cable news? What is Fox? What is CNN? And so that really got me thinking, well, there's probably something here, because it's not simply a different form of content being shown to these students, these young Americans, but the whole production cycle of how these short videos is being produced is very different from cable news or traditional news outlets.
Sure.
It's not professional journalists who are producing most of this content. A lot of the content that's being created is by amateurs. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I really just mean they're not trained professionals. These are individuals who bought some mics and some cameras at the local store, and they're creating content.
For people who aren't familiar, what might a typical political news video on TikTok look and sound like?
Yes. So most of these videos are incredibly short. We're talking about somewhere between 5 to 10 seconds. And many of them are reaction videos where they might actually clip something from CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and it's just their emotional reaction to it, basically saying good or bad. And they can't add any nuance in 5 to 10 seconds.
Yeah. And what stood out to you and your co-author about the idea of so many young people getting their news from TikTok?
So I was really concerned that because of the short form nature of these videos, again, not just TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and so forth, you don't have the ability to add nuance, to really add background information for someone to really take in the news story and interpret it properly. The short form really means that they have to rely on emotions more than anything.
How do TikTok's format and algorithms affect the type of political information its users receive?
Yes. So part of the reason we did the study is because we suspected that TikTok and similar venues might be influencing people's political attitudes. Maybe it's going to radicalize someone if they constantly watch media being produced by the far right or the far left. Surprising what we find in our study, it's not actually changing underlying attitudes. If you're a Democrat or Republican before you get on TikTok, you're not really going to change after watching TikTok. What really does change is your overall emotional health after watching TikTok or similar venues.
Right. And we'll get more into that too. Now, you and your colleagues set up the TikTok study with a large group of students at the University of Missouri. Briefly, how did the study work? Did you just put students in a room and show them videos?
No. So this was a week-long study where we sorted students for a week-long intervention where they would be shown videos that were more left-leaning, more right-leaning, or a control group where they watched funny animal videos.
Neutral.
Neutral. That's the default what TikTok is for the most part. And throughout the week and at the end of the week, we follow their emotional health or their political attitudes to see if anything had changed in that week-long exposure to whatever videos they were watching.
Okay. And we know that you found watching political news on TikTok didn't change many people's party affiliation or stances on political issues. What did change?
So again, Democrats stayed Democrats, Republicans stayed Republicans. We also asked a battery of questions about support for gun control, abortion policy. Those things didn't change. Where we did see change is people's emotional health. We saw that compared to the baseline of just watching animal videos, regardless of whether you were sorted to the Democratic or Republican condition, you had much more negative emotions. You were sadder, you were angrier, had more anxiety. And this is very, very concerning, of course, because young Americans are facing so many issues today. Although I will add the caveat that it's possible that these short-term videos are influencing politics in an indirect way, including emotions.
Okay.
It is possible, for example, that maybe in the short term, it's not changing people's ideology, but if you're constantly on TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels, the fact that you're feeling anger, anxiety, sadness, it might radicalize you in an indirect way. And that is something that concerns me.
Did you find evidence that these angry reactions motivate TikTok users to take action or, vote?
So not within the study itself, but other political science literature has definitely found that emotions such as anger, sadness, even fear can sometimes motivate people to be activated and go and be involved in politics. Unfortunately, it's not only the traditional forms of political participation. It isn't just encouraging people to go vote. It can sometimes lead, in the worst cases, people to engage in political violence. And so that's definitely concerning. But that is outside of the research we're talking about here.
TikTok has a young user base. What is your sense of how a steady stream of these types of political videos affect how young people view democracy?
So this is just kind of speculation on my part, given the 1 week time span of this study, but it does make me concerned about how young Americans are taking democracy. I'm concerned that they're not thinking of democracy as a long-term process where there's a lot of compromise. You're not always going to get your way. Sometimes your side loses even, and that's okay. Sometimes you lose and you have to accept the defeat and you just go and, vote next time. I'm concerned that because it's so emotion heavy on TikTok and similar venues, a lot of people think that it's okay to be extremely emotional when it comes to politics. And it's understandable. Politics are definitely important things. I'm a professor of political science. I care about politics, but I think we need to tone down the rhetoric if we're going to be able to meet in the middle and find some sort of compromise that everyone can be happy with, even if it's not the perfect solution for things.
And lastly, what kind of changes do you think social media platforms like TikTok should consider, if any?
Sure. And I would personally prefer that most of this be done by the companies themselves as opposed to regulation for the federal government. But regardless of what the source is, I do think there needs to be more safeguards for young Americans to make sure that they're not over-consuming this media, especially if it is harming their emotional health in the long term, or even in the worst instances, encourage them to engage in political violence, such as recent events have shown us.
That's Michelangelo Landgrave, political science professor at CU Boulder, talking about how young people who get news from TikTok end up with more negative emotions about politics. Michelangelo said that while he saw no real difference in reactions between left-leaning and right-leaning students, he'd like to study whether students from urban and rural areas have different reactions to TikTok videos. We'll share more about his study in our show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.